Hi everyone, I'm Ferdinand Capina and today I will be going to discuss about the Romantic literature. What is Romantic literature? So Romantic literature is a literary movement that began in the late 18th century which ending around the middle of the 19th century. Romantic literature marked by a focus of the individual and the unique perspective of a person that often guided by irrational, emotional impulses or a respect for nature and the primitive and a celebration of the common man. So Romanticism can be seen as a reaction to the huge changes in society that occurred during his period. So including the revolutions that burned through countries like France and the United States that ushering in grand experiments in democracy. Where did the word romantic or romanticism came from? So the term romanticism does not stem directly from the concept of love, but rather from the French word romance, which means a romantic story told in verse. So the romanticism or romantic literature focus on the emotions and the inner life of the writer. So and often used as an autobiographical material to inform the work or even provide a template for it. So unlike traditional literature at the time, Romanticism celebrated the primitive and elevated regular people as being deserving of a celebration, which was an innovation at the time. So Romanticism also fixated on nature as a primordial force and encouraged the concept of isolation as necessary for spiritual and artistic development. So let's move on to the next one, what's the purpose of romantic literature? So Romanticism had a desire and understanding toward the uniqueness, imagination, and passion, and it was a time that valued creativity over reason and sense over logic. So although their objective was to strive towards self-expressions and individual distinctiveness in the course of action, so Romantic also transformed the idea of art, viewing it as a device for political, social, and cultural change. So self-relevance was at the utmost importance for Romantics, which makes the movement turn to an emotional state rather than a style of art. So which understood broadly as a break from the guiding of the principles of the Enlightenment, which established reason as the foundation of all knowledge, which is on the Romantic movement that emphasized the importance of emotional sensitivity and individual subjectivity. So today we'll be knowing what are the characteristics of the Romanticism or the Romantic literature. So first in the list is the celebration of nature. So celebration of nature. Romantic writers saw nature as a teacher and a source of infinite beauty. So the example of this is one of the famous works of Romanticism is John Keats, Suite to Autumn, 1820. So where are the songs of spring? Where are they? Think not of them? Do has time music too? Will barred clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue? Then in a wakeful choir the small gnats mourn, among the river swallows borne aloft, or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. So that's an example of celebration of nature. So Keats personifies the season and its progression from the initial arrival after the summer, which through the harvest season, and finally to autumn's end as the winter take its place. So let's move on now to the second one, which is the focus on the individual and spirituality. So Romantic writers turn inward, valuing the individual experience above all else. So this is led to heightened sense of spirituality in Romantic work and the addition of occult and supernatural elements. So the example of here is the work of Edgar Allan Poe. So that exemplifies this aspect of the movement. Like for example, The Raven tells the story of a man grieving for his dead love. So it is an idealized woman in the Romantic tradition. So when a seemingly sentient Raven arrives, determines him, which can be interpreted literally or seen as a manifestation of his mental instability. So that's the example of focus on the individual and spirituality. And now let's move on to the third one, which is the celebration of isolation and melancholy. So Ralph Waldo Emerson was a very influential writer in Romanticism. So in his books of essays explored many of themes of the literary movement and codified them. So his 1841 essay, Self-Reliance, is a seminal work of romantic writing in which he exhorts the value of looking inward and determining your own path. So, and relying on your only work or resources that related to the existence of isolation, melancholy is a key feature of many works of Romanticism. It is usually seen as a reaction to inevitable failure. So, like for example, there's example here that perceived by Shelley in a lament. O world, O life, O time, on whose last steps I climb, trembling at the where I had stood before, when will return the glory of your prime? No more, oh, never more. So that's one of the example of the celebration of isolation and melancholy. So now let's move on to the fourth one, which is the interest in the common man. So William Wordsworth was one of the first poets to embrace the concept of writing that could be read, enjoyed, and understood by anyone. So he eschewed overly stylized language and references to classical works in favor of emotional imagery conveyed in a simple, elegant language. So example, as in his famous poem, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats in the high over valleys and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. So that's one of the example of the interest in a common man by William Wordsworth. And now let's move on to the next one, which is the idealization of women. So in works such as A Poise, The Raven, women were always presented as idealized love interests which is have pure and beautiful, but usually without anything else to offer. So like for example, ironically, the most notable novels of the period were written by women, Jane Austen, Charlotte Brontë, and Mary Shelley, like for example, but had to be initially published under male pseudonyms because of these attitudes. Much romantic literature is infused with the concept of women being perfect innocents, being to be adored, mourned, and respected, but never touched or relied upon. And now let's move on to the last one, which is the personification and pathetic fallacy. So romantic literature's fixation on nature is characterized by the heavy use of both personification and pathetic fallacy. So here are the example in Mary Shelley, which is she uses these techniques to great effect in Frankenstein, which is it fair's lake reflect a blue and gentle sky, and when troubled by the winds, their tumult is but as the play of lively infant when compared to the roarings of the giant ocean. So these are the characteristic of romantic literature. So that would be all about the romantic literature, and if you have some questions and clarifications, don't be shy to ask me. Thank you so much.